What is up, Dino Crew, and welcome to another almost end of video, end of series tie-in, and we're talking about Avatar. And before I get into it, just look how stunning this game looks. Deep diving through some caves, the flora, the lighting, everything reflecting, and then you almost, as you're going through the caves, walk into a completely different environment. And that is the thing that really stuck out to me in this game. How wild and different the game was through different sections. You'd go through parts of Pandora where the RDA had been drilling and the ecosystems had died and the plants were all, withered and the colour had drained from you. And then you'd find another area where it was brightly coloured, everything was interesting. I mean, look at this. We've just gone from like that bright blue, greeny colours to the inside where it's like oranges, darks, and you can tell we're getting closer to the RDA because the colours have changed altogether. And one of the biggest things for me with this game is I was worried when I first played it that, recently movie tie-in games haven't been the best. They haven't had the best reputation, and it's, one of the ones that really sticks with me when I look at movie tie-in games. I think it's rushed development, it's shallow gameplay, and it's something that exists purely to cash in on a release window. You play it once, you forget about it, and you move on. Avatar Frontier of Pandora. When it was announced, I think a lot of people, myself included, were cautious because history tells us licensed games usually play it safe or worse, play it lazy. But after finishing the full playthrough, after seeing how the story escalates, how the world opens up, and especially how those final episodes land, I genuinely think Avatar is one of the best movie tie-in games we've had in a very, very long time. And that's what this video is going to be about today. Not just whether Avatar is good, but why it works when so many movie games just don't. And, the bow gameplay right here that you're seeing in the background is so, so satisfying. I thought I'd be going back to using machine guns and shotguns a lot of the time. But the way that they, almost have the bows as powerful as the weapons, it really goes, you're going back and just going, actually, I'm going to go and use the bow. I'm going to try and do it as a different approach and almost go in full Navi style without using weapons. And that's one of the biggest things for me because the game could have quite comfortably said, here's a shotgun. It's really overpowered. You can use it. Don't worry about using your bow and arrow anymore. But it didn't. It gives you different bows, different ways of comboing. And that for me was absolutely brilliant. One of the biggest problems we have with movie tie-in games is often built around the film, not the world. You rush through recognizable moments, push from set piece to set piece, and you're never really allowed to exist in the universe. It just feels like homework, like ticking boxes. And the reputation didn't come from nowhere. We've had years of licensed games that promised big action and delivered very little. Games like Transformers Rise of the Dark Spark, which on paper should have been incredible, but ended up feeling unfinished, repetitive, and completely forgettable. Imagine a Transformers game feeling, just unimaginable. It was boring. That's the core. That could have been awesome, and yet they messed it up. Then we went on to like Fast and Furious Showdown, a game which somehow managed to make fast cars feel slow, clunky, and lifeless. It didn't capture the films, and it didn't stand on its own as a game either. That's the real issue with bad movie tie-ins. They sit in an awkward middle ground where you don't feel, they satisfy the fans of the films or gamers looking for depth. They exist, they release, and then they just disappear. But what's interesting is, looking back over the years, it wasn't always like this. There was a time when movie tie-in games actually worked, especially during the PS2 era, and one of the best examples of this was the old James Bond games. I grew up on a PS2 playing them. Games like James Bond, Nightfire, Everything or Nothing didn't just rely on the Bond name. They told original stories built specifically for gaming with proper campaigns, varied missions, and gameplay that respected the player. Everything or Nothing in particular felt like a full Bond movie that you could play. Big action moments, stealth, gadgets, cinematic pacing, but crucially, it wasn't shackled to recreating a specific movie. It existed alongside the films, not underneath them. And that freedom exactly why those gamers still remember it fondly. And this part here in the game now that you're seeing, this was one of the biggest surprises for me because I was walking into this area and I thought, okay, it's quite big and open. There's obviously going to be a couple of the mech suits. What I didn't expect to be was to be completely ambushed by, 10 to 15 of them. And you just think, well, how am I going to get out of this? But because you've learned how to play the game, it hasn't forced you into a situation where you're like, what do I do? It's taught you how to deal with them in different ways, And as I say, the bow here, I switched to, the short bow to do some more damage and then switch back to the long bow to do that real big bounce of damage. And that's brilliant. And Avatar does the same thing as the old James Bond games. You know, it gives you that freedom. It makes you feel, yeah, I can do this. I can do it in my own way. And that's why games like this will be fondly remembered throughout, the upcoming years. Frontiers of Pandora doesn't feel like it's trying to retell a movie you've already seen. Instead, it drops you into Pandora and says this world exists whether you're here or not. You're not constantly reminded this is a licensed product. You're not dragged along by exposition. You're allowed to explore, observe, and absorb. Pandora feels alive in ways that very few licensed worlds ever managed. The environment just isn't a backdrop, it's the main character. The wildlife, the sound design, the way the forest reacts to movement, all of it creates this constant sense that you're part of something bigger. And importantly, the game trusts you. It doesn't over explain everything, it doesn't bombard you with tutorials or arrows pointing to every objective. You learn the world by living in it, exactly how a game tie-in should be. Then there's the RDA, as you say. This is where the story really earns its place. Early on, they feel familiar, industrial, destructive, aggressive, exactly what you'd expect. But Avatar makes it feel special and how it escalates over time. It doesn't just stay static. Those drill environmental damage, they turn something far darker. By the later episodes, you realise the RDA aren't just exploiting Pandora. They're actively trying to weaponize it, creating fissures, destabilizing the planet, and ultimately planning to detonate it from the inside if they can't control it. The escalation is crucial because it gives the game a proper narrative spin. It doesn't just go, here's the bad guys, you've got to stop them. It's watching desperation turn into annihilation and being one of the only things standing in the way. And as it mentions there, the RDA, as it escalates, the different types of mechs that you have to deal with, ones with grenade launchers, ones with flamethrowers, your standard ones. There's different types of enemies, shotgun enemies, assault rifle enemies, sniper enemies. Yeah, and then there's the wildlife of the game as well, which you have to be scared of as well. You can't just walk around the forest thinking you're okay. You've got viper wolves hunting you down and something much, much bigger, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody that hasn't seen it yet. And the real main bad guy in this, Mercer, he's really, a top villain in my eyes. He isn't cartoonish. He represents the RDA mindset perfectly. Control all costs. If Pandora can't be owned, it can be erased. And by the time you reach those final episodes, infiltrating the biggest RDA base, trapping Mercer inside, and detonating a bomb within the facility, it feels everything earned. This isn't just movie game storytelling. This is a full sci-fi campaign with stakes, payoffs, and consequences. Now, I'm not going to say the game is perfect because it isn't. Some of the players will find the opening slow, others won't click with the combat straight away, and the game definitely expects patience early on. But honestly, those things also is why it works. Avatar isn't chasing instant gratification. It isn't trying to impress you in the first hour. It asks you to slow down, engage with the world, and let the story build naturally around you. And if you do that, the payoff is absolutely worth it. And this is why I think Avatar Frontiers of Pandora stands out. Not because it's flawless, but because it's ambitious. It respects its world, it respects the player, and it proves that movie tie-in games don't have to be disposable. They can be immersive, they can be meaningful stories, and they can absolutely stand on their own. So yeah, after finishing the full series, I genuinely believe this is one of the best movie tie-in games made, full stop. Not just because it leans on the films, but because it understands the universe you're in. And honestly, that's the highest compliment a licensed game can get. And considering it's a Ubisoft game as well, some full credit has to go to them for this game. It is a cinematic masterpiece. If you have watched my full playthrough, thank you very much, genuinely. And if this video convinced you to give Avatar a chance, let me know in the comments. Games like this deserve more credit than they get. I've been Dynamite Harry, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye bye.